Ina mana, ina reo, ina rao rangatira ma, no mai haere mai. Welcome to this hui of the Konihira of Whakatū, and I'll ask that you all stand for the opening prayer.
Almighty God, sovereign in all things, bless this city and its people. Guide us in local government each day that our decisions may be wise and just and magnify your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Welcome, Council, and welcome to our youth councillors. Nico, Ruby, it's really good to have you here. Thank you for making time to come to our meetings. Welcome to the public who are attending today. I have two apologies for lateness, one from Councillor Fulton and one from Councillor Walker, who is busy on council business. I'll move that we accept those apologies. Seconded by Councillor Dalberg. I will put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Just a reminder in terms of process today and order of business. The meeting is being live streamed. Reminder around your microphones, so just press the button for public forum when you come to speak, and then when you're finished, just turn it off. I do have some timing issues that I want to run through with you today. The meeting will be concluding at 12 p.m. I think that's perfectly sufficient time to conduct the business in front of us, and if we finish early, that will be good. We have several councillors with commitments today, and I think we'll have problems with quorum after 12, so we're working to be concluded by 12 p.m. at the latest. The item that is in public excluded business, I will allow at least 45 minutes for that item, so if we find that we're in public and we haven't concluded the business in public, then we'll have to resume on another day. We have a request for public forum this morning, and that's come in after the agenda was circulated. That request is from Mr. Stephen Gray, who wishes to speak on behalf of the Friends of the Maitai. Stephen wishes to speak about Council's leadership on issues surrounding discussions on forestry in the Maitai, and I'll invite Stephen to join the meeting. Welcome. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for allowing me to speak today. The Friends of the Maitai is a group of residents who have been actively advocating for the health of the Maitai River for the past 5 years. We've played a partnering role with the council during that time, especially during the council's project Maitai Mahitahi, and we're still in regular communication with council staff responsible for the Healthy Streams programs. We've been very happy with the work the council has done in the past few years to better monitor and improve the river. We especially note the work the council's done in removing significant fish barriers, restoring the wetlands at Groom Creek, improving riparian planting along the main riverbanks, and funding research into the issues of E. coli, cyanobacteria, and the fine sediment that clogs the riverbed. These have been significant steps and should be celebrated. We also applaud the current efforts to assist small landowners convert to natives or other forestry species. So currently the river is looking marginally better, but while we've made it easier for fish to move upstream and we know more about the health of the river, the hard yards towards making the river healthier are still ahead of us. Today, Friends of the Maitai is calling on the council to tackle the difficult issue of plantation forestry and its impact on the catchment of the Maitai River. We now know without a doubt that sediment from plantation forestry has the biggest negative impact on river health and also the health of Tasman Bay. About half of the total area of the Maitai River catchment is planted in pine trees. Production pine plantations up the Maitai became big in the 1980s. The council contributed to the pine industry by building roads and bridges up the catchment to facilitate the movement of logging trucks down the river and to Port Nelson. NCC also planted its own pine plantations up the river, although it's doubtful the pine harvest ever produced the, quote, green gold, unquote, its advocates touted during the late 20th century. The first significant harvest up the catchment took place from 1998 to 2005. During those 7 years, hundreds of truck trips went through the city, and residents had to advocate for relief from those intrusions and for the safety of children walking to and from schools along the trucking route. At that time, long-term complications with pine plantations were raised, but despite this, replanting of the entire catchment took place, meaning the future of the catchment was set for at least another 20 to 25 years. FOM wants to congratulate the council on the recent decision to retire 20% of its own pine plantations. This is a step in the right direction, as steep areas are most prone to erosion. As some of you know, research on sediment flows from pine plantations indicates catchments are most at risk from 5 to 7 years after harvest. It is believed that the roots of harvested pine trees hold soil for 5 years after harvest, when the roots finally deteriorate, and newly planted pine trees tree roots take 7 years to become big enough to hold the soil. Theoretically, since most of the pine was harvested 15 years ago, the amount of sediment in the river should be at its lowest, and the issues with toxic algae should also be at very low levels. Unfortunately, this isn't the case. As in the past years, cyanobacteria and other algae have proliferated in the river, with some major blooms stimulating the remedial activity that was part of Project Maitai Mahitahi and is now part of the Healthy Streams program. Given the foreign forest plantation cycle, it is now the time for the council to lead stakeholders in tackling issues associated with plantation forestry and the health of the Maitai. Specifically, Friends of the Maitai calls on the council to convene regular meetings with all key stakeholders in the health of the catchment. This includes Ngāti Koata as the largest landowner within the catchment, Tasman Pine Forest and P.F. Olson as the main logging companies within the catchment, Cawthron Institute, experts on river sediment and algae blooms, Friends of the Maitai, interested Nelson City councilors and relevant council staff, and smaller landholders with forestry blocks in the catchment. The forum would be tasked to develop a plan that remediates and minimizes the impact of plantation forestry on the health of the river. Friends of the Maitai asked council to set a timeline of 6 to 9 months for this forum to develop practical and implementable changes to plantation forestry practice within the Maitai catchment. Such a dialogue will bring the best of the Nelson community to play in solving this challenging problem. The council is the right body to bring stakeholders together. It has the responsibility for ensuring the river is healthy and continues to be a healthy recreation option. Convening and facilitating this forum will allow the council to get stakeholders to talk with each other rather than at each other, an approach Friends of the Maitai has consistently advocated for. We have our own ideas on the way forward based on our own research and studies completed by Cawthron and NIWA. 5 years of thinking about this issue has led Friends of the Maitai to advocate for a new paradigm of forestry. The future of plantation forestry should have more rigorous resource consents that include smaller clear-cut areas, riparian planting of all gullies and smaller order streams, more varied species on different rotations, and mandated targets for fine sediment. These changes will lead to less large areas being clear-cut at any one time, which will in turn lead to less erosion and less sediment in the river. This would place the Maitai catchment in line with the best practices of similar forestry near urban areas in Europe and North America. Convening and facilitating the forum will help the council be the environmental leader the residents want and the river needs. This approach could also be a potential model for other catchments within the district. We know those who advocated for and planted pine thought they were doing the best for future generations. However, we also know that the river has suffered. The council has the power and responsibility to take this issue on and lead us to a sustainable solution to the sediment problem we now better understand. Thank you.
Ngā mihi, Stephen, it's an excellent presentation. Could I just, perhaps to your list there, how would you feel about including the Ministry, MPI, Ministry for Primary Industries?
There are a lot of people that have a lot of interest, obviously, in this issue of plantation forestry. And MPI, especially with its billion tree program, is a key interested party. I don't think that they're interested in this specific catchment per se. And I think what we have heard is that there's a lot of action going on the bigger issues that are going to affect pine in the future. And so I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't say we're necessarily against it, but we don't want to get distracted. We're focused on the Mai Tai. We want to talk about what's best for this particular catchment. Each catchment is unique, but in the end, we're going to need to take some big steps. And I can see why MPI is an interested party, but I think it's council responsibility for this catchment now. Let's keep it there. And let's then, when we go to the bigger discussions with the other councils like Marlborough, Tasman, then maybe MPI comes in at a higher level.
All right, thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, thank you very much, Stephen, for a great presentation. Driving over the Whangamoas the weekend, the kids and I were struck by the level of clear felling that was visible from the highway. Am I right in thinking that in some of the parts of the world you mentioned before, like Europe and North America, clear felling is not carried out? And do you think it's time we actually stopped clear felling, particularly in the Mai Tai catchment?
Clear felling, it's a matter of degree. And I think that what we have learned is that in New Zealand, we don't have any limits on the amount of clear cutting that can happen at any one time. This is different than North America and Europe right now, partly because they've been through it and they realized the problems with it, so they started putting a constraint on it. And I think that's what we have to do up the Mai Tai as well.
A very short question from Councillor McGurk and then we'll close.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor, and through you. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for the presentation, and acknowledge the other members of the Friends of the Mai Tai in the background there, and thanks for the relationship that you've had with the positive relationship you've had with the council over the years. Just a quick question: with the new NES for plantation forest that's come into effect, have you been able to observe any differences or any change of practices since that's come into being, or is it too early to say?
Well. One, the changes that are coming in, I think, are because people. Let me back up for a second. The reason why I came to present today is I actually think we're at a different point than we've been at any point in the past in terms of Mai Tai and our relationship to plantation forestry. We have a council first that's interested in maybe thinking about regulating stuff, which is really good. And the council in the past was more interested in facilitating pine than trying to look at the issues of what its impact might be. The other thing is we have a Tasman Pine Limited changed ownership a couple of years ago to Sumitomo, and they're a much more responsible corporation. They're actually interested in sustainability issues as well and environmental issues. And then, because we have Ngāti Kawata now as the main owner, they're very interested in those issues. So I think that's why we're saying that it's time for the council to step in and help play a role with everybody talking together. The council's uniquely placed to play that role. Friends of the Mai Tai, it has some, authority because we've been studying the issue, but we don't have real authority in that sense.
Thanks, Stephen. Stephen, I'm going to keep moving. I just want to say to you, thank you very much for your presentation. I think you're absolutely right. As a regional council with regional functions, and absolutely the council is the person, there's the organisation to lead this process. I'm very interested in what you've presented. Stephen and I have spoken about this before, and I think it's good for all of council to hear this call. What I will do is arrange for some initial engagement with key staff, so that we can just start to frame this up a little bit more and maybe bring this back to a future council meeting to initiate this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, that concludes public forum. Welcome Councillor Walker and welcome Councillor Fulton. We gave your apologies for lateness this morning, so welcome to the meeting. Just in terms of the meeting today, it will be finishing at no later than 12 p.m. because a number of councillors have got commitments elsewhere and we're unlikely to have a quorum. I'm allowing 45 minutes for the public excluded matter, so if we have not finished the public business by that stage, then we will need to resume on another day. I see no reason for that, given the items that are on the agenda. We'll now move on to the confirmation of minutes. Starting on page 11, you have the minutes from the 21st of March. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Barker. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fulton. Any comments? Debate? I will put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. The minutes of the 27th of March, page 29 through 38, moved by Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor McGurk. Any questions or debate? In that case, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, thank you, EJ. All right, when we get there. Now we're on to recommendations from committees. We'll start with the Works and Infrastructure Committee. Councillor Walker.
I would like to move that the documentation as stated on 6.11 be approved.
Thank you. It's been moved, seconded by Councillor Rutledge. Any questions? Any debate? In that case, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Moving on, Councillor Walker.
I'd also like to move that the recommendation of 6.1.2 be approved, all three clauses.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Barker. I'll put that. Any questions, any debate? I'll put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to the Works and Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 28th of March. Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, I'd like to move that the recommendation before the council relating to the speed changes in Waimea Road be approved, clauses 1, 2 and 3.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Rutledge. Any questions or debate? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. On that, number 3 on that recommendation, approves implementation of a new speed limit to take effect 4 weeks after today's approval. What's that involve, implementation? Is that the fact of just popping the speed limit sign on there, or is there quite a process?
Mr Laverdis, are you able to respond to the councillor's question?
Through the chair, I have Sue McCauley that will probably know a lot more than I, but I would imagine that it would involve putting something in our communications, advising of the change of the speed limit, the implementations of signs, and there's still some formal, it's got to be logged in some formal documentation that it actually, the speed limit will be lowered from 70 to 50. So there's the physical and then there's the administrative side. Sue, have I left anything out?
Mr Laverdis. Councillor Skinner.
And from that, so when would likely be the limit physically, the speed change? So when you're rocking up there, you can't suddenly crank up to 70k to...
So through the chair, we're working to that 4 week. We're hoping to have everything in place within 4 weeks from today's meeting.
So 4 weeks, there'll be a new poll in there saying you can't do 70?
That's correct, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Any further questions? It's been moved and seconded. Any debate? Because I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Moving to the Planning and Regulatory Committee of the 4th of April. Councillor McGurk.
Move the recommendations from committee, Planning and Regulatory Committee, as indicated on the overhead, to do with the amendment to the parking policy, include jurors and Nelson elected members and appointed members.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Any questions? Any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried.
6.3.2, move that we approve the dog control fees and charges as detailed in the attachment to take effect from the 1st of July.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Fulton. Any questions? Any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Oh, okay. Well, we'll come to that. Can we come to that last, EJ? Is that all right? Thank you. We'll go to the Regional Transport Committee of the 15th of April. Councillor Rutledge. Moved by Councillor Rutledge. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Any questions? Any debate? And I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. The Governance Committee meeting. Councillor Barker of the 18th of April.
I will move the item 651, which covers the statement of intent for the Bishop Suter Art Gallery and the collection policy.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dahlberg. Any questions? Any debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
And I will move the item into 652, which Council will adopt the international relationships policy.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dahlberg. Any questions or debate? I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Now we've got some recommendations from the Community Services Committee that I think are going to come up on the screen. But they didn't make the... I can't see those in my agenda, or did I look over those? They didn't make it. They didn't quite
Madam Mayor, I just
didn't make it to the agenda.
noticed that this morning, and thank goodness for emails. Group manager has confirmed
Well
there is
done.
one regarding founders.
Excellent.
So
Thank
if
you.
we could find that.
Well spotted. It's coming up now, and I'll hand to Councillor Noonan.
So I'd like to recommend to council that the council approves the proposed 5 focus areas of Founders Park. This was debated heavily at the meeting, so we came through to this recommendation to council. I'd like to move that it's received and approved.
Seconded by Councillor Courtney. Question from Councillor Fulton.
I thought that it was going to come back to the next council meeting with the updated 10-year vision statement so we could see it. So that's why I think it's not here today. So my recollection is it wasn't going to come to this council meeting, it was going to come to the next council meeting.
Yes, I believe that was the case.
I'll go back to Mr. Ball. Were you there?
I'll go to Mr. Ball. Thank you, Mr. Ball.
I thought we got to part of it and part of it was going to be worked on and come back.
Thank you. I think that might be the case, but my suggestion is that we ask the GAs just to look back on the minutes. I don't want to do this on the fly.
EJ's just confirming, and Elena are confirming that yes, the minutes do state it will come to the following council meeting, not to this one, which is why it's not there. So if the mover and seconder are happy to
I'll
withdraw,
remove that.
You'll withdraw. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Now I think we'll move on to the Mayor's report, and I've just got an addendum to the Mayor's report to circulate. I'm not sure we got that here somewhere. All right, so I'll just move on to the Mayor's report, page 46, and I've got some additional wording to come up on the screen. So starting with the Mayor's report, we have, thank you very much, copy for me. We have a number of matters to look at in here today. The local government New Zealand rules have been attached for the changes, so if there's any comment, please, because I don't have any comment because we've got the conference coming up, and I'm just going to deal with some other conference matters as well as we go through. So if there are any comments around the change to the rules, do any councillors have any feedback so that I can take that to conference? No. That's around the rules change, so you'll see the document that is attached, so there's a rules change. No feedback at all? All right, then I will address that as I see fit at the AGM. We've also had some communication around conferences, and I've just attached an addendum there setting out the process that is followed. And so we are just noting Councillor Skinner has not been to a previous conference, or not this triennium. Councillor Laurie has put in a request to myself that I have. We have progressed with the Chief Executive and the Deputy Mayor, and so I'm bringing that here today to setting out in here the reasons for it and the background. So I'll give you a few minutes to read that, and then we'll address that item, and then we'll move on to the correspondence from the Remuneration Authority, which is the documentation we've got up here. It's been a busy week. Councillor Laurie. Oh, sorry, Councillor McGurk. So I was looking at the finger pointing and I... Oh, yes, you are. I'll give you a few minutes to read.
Sorry, I'll take me a while.
That's okay, councillor. We'll just take a little while.
Oh, we could probably, just for
We'll just wait, councillor.
clarity and a point of order, Madam Mayor, just as a point of, so there isn't any
A point of order,
misleading.
councillor Eklund?
Yeah, just so that point of clarity on the thing is I've spoken with Mary Birch and indicated my intention to go as well. Not sure why that's not part of the recommendation.
Sorry, it's not a point of order,
Yeah, it is,
councillor.
so it's not misleading in terms of what's happening to the council today. So when they're reading this information, Councillor Rutledge, it's not misleading as to what the intention is.
Well, I don't believe it is, and I'm not going to uphold the
Okay.
point of order, but when we come back
So rather
to the
than
meeting...
speak at the
we'll talk about
end, I intend to go to this, and I wrote to Mary Birch as well, and I'm not sure why that's not included in this agenda item. Indeed, when you rang me yesterday, Rachel, you spoke to me about going to this as well. So just to be clear, so everyone's aware, not just Councillor Laurie, but also I intend to go to the Local Government New Zealand conference.
We'll let you time to read it, and then councillor Eklund can speak to his desire when we get to the
My desire.
item to go. Councillor Noonan, I'll leave you to let me know when you're finished, because just when you're ready. No? Councillor Noonan, how are we doing there? Thank you. We're resuming the meeting. So we're just noting that Councillor Skinner has sufficient budget. He has not been to excuse me, could I just have everyone sitting down, please? The meeting is in session. Thank you. Councillor Skinner, Councillor Skinner, we're just noting. Councillor Laurie has made a request to attend. The Deputy Mayor has spoken with Councillor Laurie and discussed the reason. I've had an opportunity to just confirm those conversations, and I've written this up here. And so the recommendation is to confirm Councillor Laurie's attendance and to note Councillor Skinner's attendance. And thank you very much for following the process to make the request. Now, do we have any questions or any comments?
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you. Moved by the Deputy Mayor. Do I have a seconder? just to deal with that issue.
Madam Mayor,
Seconded by councillor Walker, I'd noticed over there.
I move an amendment, Madam Mayor, that confirms the attendance of Councillor Laurie and Councillor Ackland at the Local Government New Zealand Conference in 2019, so amending paragraph 2.
I think that might be a little bit challenging, councillor Ackland, because as yet, cheating, sorry, councillor Ackland, you just
you're right.
stay relaxed.
Just apologise.
Just stay relaxed. It's a nice meeting to have today. At this stage, unfortunately, councillor Ackland, which was what I was trying to have a conversation with you unsuccessfully yesterday, but we can't find any record of you making a request through the process.
Oh.
So until you do so, we can't actually address that.
Perhaps we could just, well, I move that clause, so I'm making a procedural resolution, Madam Mayor, that I move that amendment to subparagraph or paragraph 2 that confirms the attendance of Councillor Laurie and Councillor Ackland. So if we can just follow standing orders, if there's a seconder to that, then I can speak to it.
Well, I still have the problem, councillor Ackland, that we've all signed and adopted a policy, and the policy requires you to make a request to the Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor and the Chief Executive, and I'll just check with the Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, do you have any record of Councillor Ackland making a request?
No.
To you? No, my office has checked my emails. I have no record of you making a request to attend the conference, and I do see that the Deputy Mayor sent all councillors an email on the 15th of April about this matter, inviting you to get your house in order and follow the policy. He sets out what's required. We still have nothing from you, councillor Ackland.
So I'll just repeat it again. Under standing orders, I'd like to move an amendment to paragraph 2. So if I can please have that recorded and then we can debate it, and I can then speak to it rather than just having a debate without any framework or substance.
Well, I think,
So do I have a
I think
seconder
what
for
we'll
that?
do is I think we can put that in if we've got a seconder, but we'll have to just note that the policy hasn't been followed, so I'm speaking to that.
I'll second it.
All right, so it would be procedurally not following the policy. So that's councillor Laurie and councillor Ackland, and you'd like to make an amendment to what has been moved. So we will deal with the amendment first. Dealing with this with the amendment, councillor Laurie? Question on the amendment, councillor Rutledge, and then I'm just going to take a pause to make sure that we're two fine women to my left are happy with what we're doing. So councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just inquiring about the cost of attending the conference, travel and accommodation. I note that councillor Laurie's made some amendments to he's made provision to stay with family to keep costs down. Would councillor Ackland's attendance keep him within the training budget provided?
Councillor Laurie's keeping with the training budget.
Councillor Ackland's speaking with a question on the amendments, Madam Mayor, because I guess we haven't had the opportunity to consider that, whereas we have with councillor Laurie and
I'm not
Councillor
quite
Skinner.
clear on what your question is.
So, does councillor Ackland have sufficient training budget remaining to attend conference with the conference fee, with the travel and accommodation?
No.
Well, actually, I might need to take a little pause, and I'll just take a brief adjournment just to check that with Ms. Birch. So give me a moment, because we'll just
as long as this person's a member of a professional body rather than just the next door neighbour.
So it's, it's basically what it says is that,
Hearing aids.
Please. Can't hear what's...
sorry, councillor, could you please take your seat, and you're disrupting the meeting. Councillor Delberg, thank you for your question. I think what the exclusion is, it cannot be a family member or someone that normally resides, but you have to find satisfactory evidence satisfactory to the local authority, the amount paid for childcare. And so that is there. So I don't think it says it has to be a registered childcare provider, and I have to say that there's good reason for that, because many councils around the country operate with night meetings and when childcare centres are closed. And this is one of the really big problems for people. So it allows that, but not for a family member. Councillor Fulton.
Look, are we still at questions? I do have some concerns about the fact that family member can't be paid for childcare, because in choosing to stand for council, it might be that the spouse or partner does not work to support that person in their role. And so what we know is in terms of pay equality, and that generally it is children which holds people back time after time in terms of work opportunities. So it is work taking care of children, and I'm surprised that whether it is a person, a spouse or a partner or someone else who is taking care of those children when you're attending a meeting, that should be recognised.
Well, I think the Remuneration Authority's turned its mind to equity issues, so I'm sensing that if I was to test the meeting, Councillor Fulton, to include that, it wouldn't get through. But I just need some nods if we would have said no. I don't think it would.
Okay, we're not quite there yet, right. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that.
Now, any other questions? No, we've finished with questions. So, Councillor Laurie. So we're now, I've moved, Councillor Laurie has seconded. Speaking to the motion. It's just this part. We're just dealing with this part, yes?
So, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'm speaking in support of this. I have thought about this a lot over the years, and then in 2016, after the council elections across the country, I read about Huranui District Councillor Julie McLean, who is a leader in her community and a young mother, who was encouraged by her community to stand for council, who did so under the misconception that she might be able to get some funding to help with her childcare. She has 3 children. She is the main caregiver in her family. She then discovered, once she'd been elected, that in order for her to get some childcare, she would have to convince a majority of her fellow councillors that they would have to fund it. And she discovered that that was probably going to be really too hard to even attempt. And she very bravely spoke out about the situation. And she highlighted, and she has highlighted since then, that only, I believe, 6% of elected representatives in New Zealand are under the age of 30. And as we know, looking at this council, under 40, thanks. So 6% are under 40. And we also know, looking at this council and at the council down the road, that women are particularly poorly represented in local government. And that's not because women, I believe, don't want to run for local government. It's that for many, particularly younger women, if you want to be a caregiver and run, it is pretty much impossible, particularly in parts of the country like Huranui, where a district councillor who makes decisions that affect, generations only get paid about $19,000 a year. So this, I think, is a really big step for the Remuneration Authority, and it has been something that people have argued for and called for a long time. But by not making it mandatory across the country, across all districts, it actually fails in trying to achieve what it's set out to do, and that is help people participate in the democratic process. Because, as we've heard many a time, democracy is kind of another word for participation. That's not just about people voting. That's about people being able to stand for public office. It's about people being able to represent their communities. And I believe one of the reasons that we don't have a bigger turnout in our elections is that when people look at their councils, they don't see their community physically represented around the table as much as they should. And that, I don't think, helps us get people engaged in local government. So I really encourage my fellow councillors to support this. It's not like there's going to be a tsunami of young parents charging into council chambers up and down the country trying to claim this money. But it could make a big difference to a small number of people who in turn could make a big difference to local government. People who at the moment can't do it. They simply can't manage it.
Thank you.
A couple more points. So this funding is separate from the 20 hours free that the government provides. The 20 hours free childcare the government provides is of no use to you if your children are under the age of 3. It's of no use to you if you have to go to meetings at night or you have to go to things during the weekend. It's also of no use to you during school holidays. And this will cover that. This will make it possible for younger parents, more younger parents, to participate. I think Julia McLean's done a great job. I think everyone who's supported her has done a good job. And I think if we want to get more young parents around this table and we want to get more women around tables like this around New Zealand, we need to support this.
Ka pai. I've got Mr Tregurtha here who is able to answer Councillor Rutledge's questions. So I'll invite Mr Tregurtha and then I'll continue with my speaking order to Councillor Noonan, followed by Councillor Rutledge.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Loy's summed up the access about the 20 hours reasonably well. I'll just make perhaps another couple of points that, of course, children age 3 and 4, of course, that's only part of the age group of children or that would need support during this time, where their parent or their caregiver is at council meetings. Those 20 hours a week are generally quite structured, so children of course would be enrolled in either a morning or afternoon program. Don't think I need the members here to have drawn to your attention too strongly that our meetings don't actually necessarily finish at 12 o'clock. Or start neatly at 1 o'clock, and of course you can never be sure of when that time period for council meeting may finish. And as far as perhaps supervision, I think the legal age in New Zealand for one young person to look after children is 14.
Thank you, Mr Tregurtha. Councillor Rutledge, do you want to say anything further in terms of your question?
Oh, it just didn't address the question, Madam Mayor.
Well, then would you like to restate that and see if we can try and help you with that?
The question was whether this applies in addition to the work and income subsidy or only supplements that for whatever the gap there is. So is this on top of any work and income subsidy?
Thank you, Mr Tregurtha. Thank you very much for stepping up to this today.
Through the Mayor, I think it would be up to the elected member to determine the most appropriate child support. That may or may not be using the 20 hours. It could be that if there was an arrangement that the parent had for the child to have care, in the morning or in the afternoon, this would be on top of that. But I wouldn't see that as being double dipping. The child's access, to that 20 hours of care is something which is provided without discrimination right across New Zealand. And Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering if there's a possibility to help get this through, that maybe we should consider councillors who are part-time and roles are scoped as part-time as being different from those who are full-time. Because if you are working full-time, that you wouldn't be accessing childcare as part of your job usually. So those major metros that councillors are full-time employed at might be considered separately from the rest of the country.
I'm probably not inclined to support that myself, councillor. I think that there is, I think the fundamental issue is what we're putting in this feedback to the Remuneration Authority is essentially that you need to mandate, as Councillor Laurie said, this needs to be mandated and not a matter of negotiating the welfare of children through a newly formed council. And having put a couple of those together, it's not exactly the smoothest, easiest job in the world to get people lined up in their roles and negotiate nicely about that. And usually it's to come in and have to try and negotiate some childcare allowance at the same time, I think is just unfair. So, right, we're going to go on to, no, we're in debate now, aren't we? Yes, we're in debate. So Councillor Newland, Councillor Rutledge, Councillor McGurk, Councillor Delberg and Councillor Fulton, and that probably should be enough.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Rolling the light off there.
Fundamentally, I support this recommendation. I think Councillor Rutledge started to allude to the fact that this is not the only problem in standing for a council. There are many monetary challenges. If you are the only income earner or the only payment coming into the house, this is not a full-time payment. What we get for working for council is not a full-time payment. You cannot pay all the bills on one person's payment from council. I think this is a beginning, this is a start. This addresses a group of people that we haven't got around the table. So it's the beginning of. As you've said, Madam Mayor, I think deciding who gets what payments after the election is going to be absolutely diabolical. And it's not until you've got your position, whether you're a chair, a deputy chair or a councillor, you're not going to know whether you're going to need to work part-time to top it up. So there are difficulties, because to take the responsibility and to do the public office that we have, I think it's, for me, it's full-time, and I enjoy that, and it's something I very much enjoy getting up for. But as far as the monetary side is, you know, you don't know until your pay comes in whether you're going to need another job to top it up or not. And I think, so the challenge for the Remuneration Authority is going to be, are payments big enough around the country? Some cities it's fine, some it's a challenge.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Rutledge, you indicated you didn't wish to speak. No, thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, I'll make this brief because I think Councillor Laurie's probably covered most of the points that I wish to cover. I will speak in support of this recommendation, and I'm heartened to see that the removal of the discretionary elements is a key part of it. And the reason for that is that, as you alluded to, it's at the beginning of the council, and you may, a more conservative or a more or a less progressive council, it will be trying to negotiate in that sort of circumstances. Childcare allowance is difficult, especially if you are a brand new councillor who's just been elected on. So the removal of those discretionary elements and the variations and the variables are just about a little complicated. This needs to be a rate that is published ahead of time, so those who are wishing to put themselves forward for standing on their council know what they are up for, they know what their remuneration is. We have to take it, and the same goes with childcare. Provided those are there, people go in with their eyes wide open. The second one that I would like to point is that it is actually, this is one step that is removing a barrier into a more diverse council. It is a step in the right direction. I'm not sure that we've got there yet, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So I'll encourage all members of the council to support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Councillor Delberg.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'm supporting this. I kind of get where we're coming from. My question really is the $6,000. Just does not seem quite enough. In actual fact, if this was going to actually do the job it's supposed to do, that's not enough money. And then I look at on the page 137. If you've got one child and you're earning $800 a week, 40 grand a year, you're already subsidised up to $250 a week anyway. So I'm kind of getting, it goes right back to where Councillor Rutledge mentioned earlier, the base rate for working as a councillor isn't high enough to attract the person anyway. And if they are going to accept the $40,000 part-time, because that's what the Remuneration Authority has told us all, we're all part-time workers as councillors. That's why they're restructuring it. Then that's the deal, it's 40 grand. So I don't think your $6,000 is going to be enough if you're trying to do what you're trying to do, but I'll support it as a movement in the right direction.
Councillor Delvig, and then final speaker is Councillor Fulton.
Thank you. Gosh, I almost feel like we're deciding on what the Remuneration Authority policy will be. Wouldn't that be great if it was being decided in this meeting? So I really support this this recommendation and this feedback to the Remuneration Authority. I think it's a significant step in the right direction, and well done to Councillor Laurie for supporting this movement forward. I just wanted to touch on personally raising 3 young children. I probably spent $40,000 a year in the first 5 years of their life on childcare. I was completing a PhD and my husband took on a second job to pay a nanny, so it is really, really hard in terms of working and raising young children. What we do know is that the pay equity gap between women and men is significantly higher for women who have raised children in terms of the amount of time they take off and out of their careers to stay at home. We also know that there's a lot of men who are more and more staying at home to share that care, and it concerns me that that rate is only for people who are non-family members, because we know that sometimes family members are the best carers, and if there was a child with special needs, it could be that a spouse is choosing to not work to support their partner in a local government role. So I think that we need to be mindful that there's multiple reasons why a parent might be the best carer of a child, and there's multiple reasons why only one person might be able to work, even if it's in local government and that's a part-time role. So I'm going to support it. I think it... I just, at the weekend, watched an amazing documentary called RBG about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think it's all worth you watching in terms of her legislation changes, in terms of supporting women and supporting women in work, and how much we've changed, how much we've progressed. But these sorts of steps in terms of supporting people into the workplace whilst being good parents is really key.
Just in terms of the right to reply, I'm going to really encourage you to support this today. I know that there are many other circumstances where support would also be valuable to really allow, as we talked about before, the diversity of representation at council tables and boards around New Zealand. This is a very real issue, and I'm pleased that the Remuneration Authority have stuck with it. It's taken some engagement to keep it moving through, but we've kept it moving through. And now I think we've got an opportunity to give some really considered feedback to the Remuneration Authority, and hopefully in our council cycle, that because we're early in May, we may be able to encourage other councils around New Zealand to also do this. So if this goes through today, I will be sending this to Local Government New Zealand and asking them to circulate it to councils around New Zealand to see if we can get some support. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. It's a very good step forward. Now, moving back to just see if we can get this Mayor's report wrapped up. We'll go back to, we'll just deal with noting any questions on the discretionary fund. So we just stay at the table, please, because we're going to get this dealt with now. Any questions on the discretionary fund?
Yes.
Question, Councillor Barker.
Talking about the discretionary fund for attendance at conferences.
No, I'm talking about the Mayor's discretionary fund at item 4.
Okay.
No, and then just item 3 is the, I've participating in the Tuia Rangatahi program again, this leadership program again this year. Thoroughly enjoying that. Have a fantastic mentee, Tamati James Wilson. Really enjoying working with him, and we're connecting Tamati James up with Pat as well. So he gets the opportunity just to have the engagement both at my level, at Mayor's level, but also at Chief Executive's level. So I think it's going to be a fantastic year with Tamati James. So now going back to dealing with, we were dealing with an amendment so that has been moved and seconded, and this is in relation to the remainder of the Mayor's report, which is just getting these conference processes sorted. So where was I on my list? we had a question, that's right. We had a question in relation to the cost of attending the conference. And do we have an answer? Thank you, Ms Harrison.
So through the Mayor, my understanding of the cost for the current year, and this would be on an early bird basis, would be $2,455 per attendee.
Perhaps if you could just tell us what that's made up of.
So through the Mayor, the conference fee, which I understand includes the dinner, would be $1,615.
Okay.
1615. The travel at this current time is sitting at $140. Yes, and the accommodation is $700.
Allowance therefore. Okay, all right. So there's some ways to bring that down, for a councillor. Councillor Barker has a question, and then Councillor Ackland's got a question.
It's just
and Councillor Skinner. Question.
In the interest of my accepting that we're treating everybody fairly, I would like to know the amount that Councillors Laurie and Ackland overspent their budget in the 2012-2015 year. I'd just like to be clear and know just totally what the position was, because I believe, I know that Councillor Laurie's was well overspent in that last triennium.
It's been about 6,000.
I want to know the figure.
So Councillor Barker, are you talking the whole pool in terms of the travel and training? I'm not sure the policy was the same. And that's one of the things I would have to look at. We would have to look at. Which element is it that you're looking for in terms of conference expenditure? Conference expenditure.
In the previous triennium.
In the previous triennium. All right, we'll see if it'll take a little bit of digging, and I'm conscious that we really have got to get this meeting concluded, but we'll see if we can find that.
I'm quite happy to support the recommendation, but I would like to know.
Understand that. Right, thank you. Councillor Ackland.
I think the public needs to know.
Question.
Yeah, I've got a question around, so probably through advice from the governance advisor, I'd imagine, or through the acting Chief Executive, is just on the process of this recommendation coming to Council, because my reading is 9.5, 9.13, Appendix 6 and Appendix 10 of Standing Orders, is that unless there's business being brought by recommendation from a chairperson for an extraordinary purpose, this should have been on the agenda. And since it wasn't on the agenda, it's had the consequence of depriving information being provided to the committee, to the council, to actually understand the context and indeed all of the background. And indeed the thing that your worship has constantly hammered to us, that if there's any questions on an item in the agenda, questions should be raised before the meeting. And of course that opportunity is deprived where an agenda item arrives moments before being voted upon and is indeed, in my view, inaccurate. So, can I have some advice on that, please? 9.5, 9.13, Appendix 6 and Appendix 10.
Right, 9.5, 9.13.
13.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to answer that question?
Appendix 6
Governance
and Appendix
advisors?
10.
I did discuss the matter with the governance advisor before the meeting. Ms Birch, would you like a few moments to look at that? I do recall last year, councillors, that you wanted, in the interest of transparency, we had quite some discussion and you were concerned that you didn't know who was going to conference. And so this year, to avoid that situation again, we've put it forward so that you can see. And then we thought we'd only end with a cascade as well. The Deputy Mayor went to some effort to get you all to engage in the process.
Sorry,
you
Madam Mayor, that's
received
not
an
an answer
email
to
on
my
the
question.
13th. It's all right, just while we're waiting, I'm just having a conversation with Chair Councillor Ackland. You did get an email on the 13th encouraging you to engage in the process that you needed to follow. Because what I don't want is, I want to try and get this wrapped up today so we know who's going. I don't want them all dribbling in and having councillors come at the last minute saying they're going to conference and it costing the ratepayers very, very significant sums of money.
So point of order, Madam Mayor, so that's misleading and indeed is disrespectful to me.
I wasn't talking about you, Councillor Ackland.
Well, that's the implication of what
I'm
you were
not
saying.
upholding your point of order.
Well, if I can just make my point of order clear, Madam Mayor, is that indeed weeks ago I was in correspondence with the council and with the Chief Executive through Mrs Birch, and indeed she said to me that there was an issue coming before council for this very issue. And when I raised it with her, I said, what is the process indeed that needs to be followed, because this was news to me. And she explained that I'd need to make an application. And I emailed her and said, yes, I do wish to make an application. So that will be all in correspondence with the Chief Executive.
Yes, and
indeed, as I understood it, if I can finish, Madam Mayor, and indeed, as I understood it, she was writing a referral to Councillor Matheson, having raised an issue. So I understood that she was liaising with Councillor Matheson when that correspondence was occurring. And then today I read the new piece of information that's arrived. I can't really call it a recommendation at this stage because I don't believe that it complies with standing orders in my reading of standing orders. That seems to be absent. So what I've asked for with my correspondence with Mrs Birch was to understand the process that was being followed in this instance, and I never got a satisfactory response. So in terms of what process exists. So now I'm surprised to see that apparently a process has existed that I haven't met, when indeed I've been signalling constantly through my correspondence with the Chief Executive, through Mrs Birch, for my attendance. So I'd like some clarity around how this item has come up to council and in its misleading form.
Well, I'm not going to uphold your point of order because there is nothing misleading, and I'm going to note that again. And we're waiting at the moment just to get an answer to your question around standing orders, which we shall hopefully now have from Ms Birch. Are you ready for that, Ms Birch?
Yes, thank you. Through the Chair, with regards to the additional information that the Mayor has provided, as the topic of the LGNZ was already included in the Mayor's report, it was felt that this was just a minor matter that could be added rather than it being requiring to be a separate issue.
Thank you. So that's the explanation around the standing orders. Now, next on my question list, I had, who did I have next on my question list? Was it, was Councillor Skinner? No. Sorry?
I am somewhere on the list.
You are on the list, so you go now, because I think you are next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in regards to numbers going to conference, how many would you or the council seem to think is a good number to have of councillors? I don't know if there's a rule of thumb.
Oh, look, it tends to, it's varied, and it's varied. Most councils, a lot of councils, I'm thinking of Tasman District, send the mayor and one or two usually. The other councils, if it's held in your city, then you tend to, a lot of councillors go, so if it's somewhere close by, a lot go. But it really does vary. I mean, we had a lot go one year. Usually, 3 or 4 is enough, but it just depends. And I think the rule of thumb was, essentially what it said out in the policy was, the rule of thumb was, you've got really enough in your budget to go once or twice if you keep really careful about, well, no, actually once really, if you want to go do the triennium. But if there's a particular matter that's in the conference program or something that you want to look at, but...
So, Maurice, I see obviously in the first year we had 7 people went.
Yes, that was
the
a bit of a
second year was 4, and this year was only going to be, I see 1 myself, but I see Councillor Laurie's been added. Now, I thought that's fairly light, 1 or 2. I mean, I would be nice to see Councillor Courtney go along as well. So I was expecting a few more. To be honest, I was expecting a few more than just myself. I'm quite happy to be a lone. Often at a table, a lone ranger. But I was expecting a few more. Not that I can't look after.
I'll go back to the Deputy Mayor because, as you know, I was on leave last week, and so that's why he had.
So sort of saying is having 2, 3 or 4 people there is, I've got no issue with that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I think you canvassed.
What I did was, because you were all over the place, I picked it up and said I'd fix it, and I went back to the policy that we all determined at the start of this term. Everybody agreed to, and that was 50% of the budget that was allocated to each councillor would be set aside for attending conferences. So then I got a list of who had left in that area, and there was only 3 that qualified. One was Councillor Courtney, the other was myself, and the other person was Councillor Skinner. I'm not going. Councillor Courtney's not going, so at the moment, at that point, you were the Lone Ranger. I then sent out the email and asked if you didn't qualify through your remaining expenditure out of your conference, you can apply and we would put it to council, which we did last time. we had a debate and had it approved for some councillors to go. Don't point of order
Point of order,
me.
point of order. That is not what happened last year.
What happened last year?
Last year, we got a report.
Councillor,
Misleading.
Councillor, I will uphold that to the,
Thank you.
yes, absolutely correct. Deputy Mayor, nearly there, but not quite. So if we're getting down to semantics.
Well, I don't want to get into
Last year,
semantics.
well, so last year, we went through the process of running it through, and we didn't have any issues. We didn't have any issues particularly around that year, but we had, there was a question in here, and Councillor, and I think it might have been Councillor Ackland, was very concerned that it wasn't in front of council and that it wasn't transparent, and not happy about that. So this year, we're making sure that we're putting it up here so that you can see how the process has run.
Thank you.
So it's absolutely there. There was some
Thank
real concern at that point, so here it is.
Okay, well, the only approach I had came from Councillor Laurie, and he approached me and had a discussion about his attendance. What I recommended to the Mayor was that he be included, because the issue you've just discussed on childcare is of extreme importance and has been championed by Matt, and I felt that that would be a good platform for him to further push his case, and that was the tipping point that made me recommend Councillor Laurie to the Mayor. Nobody else approached me, and I asked for that, and it didn't happen. So I stuck to the rules, and that's what I did. My recommendations was those two.
Thank you. All right, so perhaps we can just, Councillor, I just want to check. Councillor Courtney, do you wish to attend?
I'm still looking at my diary. I have
happy to include
some
you.
long-standing commitments that I would have to rearrange, but I have had dialogue with the Deputy Mayor, and I'm still considering my option there.
All right, so you may attend. I'm just conscious.
May well, but I have long-standing commitments
thank you.
that I've
All
got
right.
to move and arrange.
All right. Do you think you'd be able to give me an indication of when you'd be ready to make a decision? All right, thank you. And I'll just check. Councillor Ackland, did you approach the Deputy Mayor about attending the conference? No, I'm just doing clarification questions as the Chair of meeting. Councillor Ackland, did you approach the Deputy Mayor about attending the conference?
All my correspondence was with Mrs Birch.
You didn't approach the Deputy Mayor and respond to his email?
If I can answer, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
All of my correspondence was with Mrs Birch, who wrote on behalf of the Deputy Mayor saying that the Deputy Mayor was taking this approach, and I responded to her, believing indeed that she was in correspondence with the Deputy Mayor. Perhaps we could clarify that.
Well, I just checking as you followed. What I can see is in the email trail, which I was trying to get this sorted out yesterday and have a conversation with you about it, but that proved to be unsuccessful. We had, I can see that Ms Tyne from my office emailed on behalf of the Deputy Mayor on the 17th of April, I think it was, asking all councillors to engage. Well, I think we're going to move on because really, Councillor, we've got an important...
I'd like to debate the amendment
All
that
right,
I've
so
moved.
any further questions? I'll go to Councillor Fulton first and then I'll go to Councillor Newman.
I just have a couple of questions regarding the process, because I think, and I was away, so I might have missed an email from Councillor Matheson, in which case I apologise. So I approached the governance advisors to find out how much money I had left in my budget, and I was told that I had no money left to attend conferences, but that I still had money I could use for other training matters. And then Councillor Matheson's email came up reinforcing that. So it didn't enter my mind that he was seeking people who had overspent their budget to consider to come. I'm not saying that I necessarily want to go, but I do feel like there was an impression created in his first email which said only these people are eligible to attend this year. There might have been a subsequent email which I've missed, and I'm just trying to find that. And so, and certainly the impression had been created by the governance advisors that there was that you've spent your money and you can't go, rather than if you would like to go, let the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor and Chief Executive know. So I'm sorry that I might have misunderstood some of the email communication around that. I think in future years we're all going to be far more up to speed on it. Certainly when I attended the last conference last year, I had no idea that I'd missed the change in the we used to be able to spend up to $5,000 on attending conferences. Now it it appears we can only spend $2,500 on attending conferences. So there's been some changes, and I think it's important to remember that we're all coming up to speed with the process, and normally we do go to the governance advisors like Councillor Ackland has to find out if we can attend conferences. So my question is, in future, how do we address this to ensure that the governance advisors either copy the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Chief Executive in on our correspondence to make sure we're going through the right channels?
Well, councillors, what I would say to you is that I can see the email sent out by the Deputy Mayor, and he is indicating to you that you can apply. There is a provision, you make a request to the Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor and the Chief Executive if you wish to go. It's a very simple thing to do. He said, in this case, he said, I'd have to say there must be exceptional circumstances to have this granted. Now, that you must have some circumstances you're coming in to make your case around what you're going to do. You might be reducing accommodation costs, other things, that's fine. Or you can say, well, actually, it's a really important thing, I want to go. You come and discuss, there's something on the conference programme that I'm really interested in, I want to be there. But the best thing, Councillor Fulton, is to be familiar with the policies that relate specifically to you as elected members. This is not new. Read the policy and follow the steps in the policy. It's really quite simple. Councillor Skinner, I think, was next with a question, were you? Oh, no, I might have covered. Oh, you've got, no, you want to debate?
I'll debate shortly,
And then Councillor Noonan.
This here, the training expenditure, but we also have a pool for a training pool. It's a pool that can be accessed in circumstances. Has that been accessed at all?
For all councillors?
That's correct.
It'll vary, I think, in terms of the training pool, but it does get sent out to you, so you do have that available to you, because you're asked to check it on a regular basis to make sure it's right. So I'm not going to go through the training pool today, Councillor. It's going to be because it's available to you. Now, Councillor Noonan, did you have a question? Just before I go to your question, Councillor Noonan, I've just got the answer to a question. Ms Harrington's got the answer to Councillor Barker's question.
So through the chair, Councillor Barker asked what was spent in the last training by Councillor Laurie and Ackland, is my understanding of the question?
But as that the two people in this amendment.
Yeah, I mean, so through the chair, I've got the spreadsheet that was presented at the last meeting of the last training, and my understanding is Councillor Ackland spent 3,373 and Councillor Laurie was 5,600.
On conferences?
On total training.
On total training, right, okay.
Sorry, can I respond to that?
No, not at this point.
It's very unfair.
No, not at this point. I'm going to come round, so we'll just sort that. Right. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just regarding what we're looking at on the screen, it's not clear to me what council is actually being asked to come up with dollar-wise for each of these councillors. We now see that 2,500 can go to conferences, and the two that want to go, Councillor Ackland has 200 and... I'm just sorry, I'm being distracted by my left.
Councillor Delberg and Councillor Skinner, it's quite hard for Councillor Noonan to hear.
Sorry, so where was I? So we have 2,500 for conferences, and the two councillors that have expressed their interest to go have 285 and 195 left, and it's going to cost 2,455. So are we asking the ratepayer to pay up to the full cost of the conference within their total budget, or are the councillors going to be paying, so I'm just asking for the ratepayer here, are the councillors going to pay the difference between, for Councillor Ackland, 285 between there and 2,455? And for Councillor Laurie, he's got 195. Is he going to pay the difference personally up to 2,455? I don't think it's clear from the recommendation up on the screen that what we're actually being asked to come up with, or whether it's coming from somewhere else, which I'd like to know the answer to that question before I'm asked to vote on it.
Right, so to the best of my ability, I will answer what I know, and I only have, as you said, the Deputy Mayor and I've only had communications or a request come in from Councillor Laurie, and that's set out in the report that he is going to cover his own accommodation costs. So that, I think that was around an estimate of 700. All right, so the balance of that, yes, today what we're saying to you is that we're bringing it up to say that we're planning on using the other funding that's in that amount. There's the 5,000 that's already a budget line. Yes, it is all ratepayer funding. It's all funded by, ratepayers, this funding. And we're going to use some of the rest of that 5,000 to pay the difference. That's what that is.
So could we have that in the recommendation so that it's clear from in the future that people look back and go, so up to the.
We'll minute it, Councillor. I don't want to start messing around with this at the moment, thank you. We'll minute it. EJ's minuting it.
And I think that should be noted, that it's up to the maximum allocation.
Well, I'm comfortable with it in the minutes.
Because I don't think it shows. Well, I disagree.
Otherwise, you'll need to prepare an amendment, a further amendment, Councillor. I'm very conscious that we have an important matter on public excluded to deal with today as well. Councillor Laurie has got a question.
So my question relates to, I understand that, and this is with respect and aroha, I asked this question, but I think it's useful for getting the landscape, is that Councillor Walker has attended 3 conferences already this term that were not training opportunities. They were opportunities to attend conferences about water, something he's interested in, something that covers his brief as a chair of Works and Infrastructure, and there has been no problem with that. So I just want to check that is confirmed that has been the case, and I would like to be told, I'd like someone to explain to me why that was not a problem, and all of this, for some reason, wasn't a problem last year, but for some reason it's a problem today. Those 2 questions, if someone could answer them, please.
There is no problem today. We're just bringing this forward. We've got an item around the conference. It was a topic of the LGNZ conference. It was a topic of debate last time, and so we're bringing it forward because then you can all know who's going to represent the council for the local government conference.
Point of order.
Councillor,
point of order, I'm sorry. Point of
what
order.
is your point of order?
Point of order misleading. The debate last year was not about whether or not people should go to conference. The debate was not about whether or not Councillor Fulton or Councillor Dalberg could attend 2 conferences consecutively and use more than half of their allowance to attend conferences. That was not the debate at all. The only discussion last year was when I put my hand up and said, I didn't know this was possible. I thought there was some policy that had been brought in to stop this sort of thing. And I was reassured, no, it's fine, it's just a general guide, everything's cool. And I said, good stuff, this is great. And we moved on.
Well, I'm not going to uphold your point of order. I'm going to move on. Councillor Walker has attended several of the Water New Zealand conferences. At the moment, local government is undergoing the biggest review it has had probably for 20 years in relation to the 3 Waters review being conducted by Minister Mahuta, and it is very important that we do have our chair engaged in that process, critically important. I think Councillor Walker and staff attend that conference. It was a very important conference to be at, and I think that will have been reported through at some point. Councillor Walker, just to speak on this, but I really am conscious, councillors, that...
I'd just make a comment that while I would dearly love to attend this year's one as well, because I won't be a councillor next term, it is not fair on the ratepayers for me to go.
No.
So that's why.
Thank you.
So follow-up question from me is, did Councillor Walker have to ask the Deputy Mayor for permission to use more than half of his budget to attend those conferences? In the same way that we're apparently being asked to do?
Yes, no, he did come in. He did come in and asked. Every time Councillor Walker wanted to go, he came in and approached me, and we had a discussion through our Deputy Mayor's chairs and Chief Executives meeting. So yes, we were all very aware of the fact and considered that and the importance of it. So yes, he's been very diligent. He doesn't ever go and sign up for a conference without me knowing.
So, Madam Mayor, why didn't it come to this table for us to discuss and debate like we're doing with Councillor Ackland and myself?
Probably been reported through the Mayor's report or the Chair's report in the process of going through, but I think it's just a timing issue.
So one rule for one councillor, different rule for other councillors?
No, Councillor, we've got it here today because last time we dealt with this, I'm not going to spend any more time on this, you all wanted to know who's going, who's going to your conference. This is the big conference, and you could all go if you all wanted to go, and you all said today you wanted to go, then I'd actually like to know that so we can consider it. That's helpful for us. Then we know how much ratepayer funding is going to be spent on this conference. It's really simple. It's not complicated. Right, we've got a speaking order. We're now at the amendment. I think we're moving on now. We're only doing speaking to the amendment. Thank you. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to support this, and on the basis of fairness, I don't think it's fair. I think that we've been given a budget for conferences. If we've exceeded it, we've exceeded it. I'm embarrassed that we're even having this conversation. I'm embarrassed that that it's got to the point that we have it's petty politicking, or petty. It's petty. It's just unnecessary. I think what this shows me is that we need to tidy this policy up, so that we don't have this debate every time. We maybe have a draw of 3 every time that goes to conference, and we have a rotation, because this is just ridiculous.
For Courtney?
Your Worship. Yes, I'm speaking to that because I think it's, I think, why are we resisting? Your Worship, why are we doing it in this way? Why are we resisting a councillor, a valuable councillor, one of Nelson's leading legal brains in the city, who wants to go and represent this council at the Wellington Local Government Conference. He contributes, he's an important part, a valuable part of this council, and he wants to further his knowledge and represent us there, and I would be proud if he could do that. So I'm going to support it. And I'm even going to offer that he could take half of my allowance, my 5,000, and take half of that if you'd allow me to do that, because that's how strongly I feel about it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McGurk, so we've had, and I'm going to do 3-3 on this one because we've got lots of business.
Yeah, I'll speak in support of this, the recommendation up on the board, including the amendment. Just to do a quick tally of the numbers, I think at the moment, we're in credit in terms of the conference expenditure overall by $6,173. So there are sufficient overall funds there. I'm not intending to go to any more conferences this year, and I think there's probably a few other around the table. The ratepayer is going to be no worse off than they were if they didn't go. So the funds are there, the budget's been allocated. Some of us will choose to exceed the amount, others won't, but overall we're still in credit.
Thank you. So we've had Councillor Noonan, we've had Councillor Courtney, we've had Councillor McGurk, and now we've got Councillor Eklund. There's no right to reply on amendment. No, you'll need to speak now. Standing orders.
Oh, standing orders. So, yeah, I agree with the Councillor Noonan, really. It does seem bizarre that we're having to argue this and it's taken so long, and the time pressure of a meeting that the Prime Minister's coming to Nelson and the meeting having to end at 12 o'clock. I think it's completely petty and unnecessary, and this is the reason why people disengage with the process. We always spend more time talking about ourselves than issues that affect the community, it sometimes feels. There was a bunch of students in the public gallery from NMIT. I don't think they would have been particularly enamoured with our process or indeed with our substance from viewing this morning. I just don't understand why this has come up. I don't understand. I've been asking several times what the process is in this situation, and as I understand it, because this is the first chance I've had to speak, so thank you very much, is that the argument against my interest in going is that I didn't specifically speak to the Deputy Mayor. It just seems stupid. I mean, I think the Deputy Mayor knew, and if he didn't know, that's no fault of mine. That was an issue that messages weren't passed on by council staff. No blame there, but certainly it's not my doing. And that why, now that we're in the meeting, should that be held against the intention, which seems legitimate, that I go with having shown my interest in going and indeed having applied, if I can use those words. About 3 or 4 days ago, I asked Mrs. Birch for a copy of all emails between Chief Executive, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, just so that I could get background and understand what the conversation, what indeed the problem is, what indeed the issue has been up to date, because I've never understood what this applying for and making an application and writing my application to the council was. And the Mayor phoned me yesterday upset that I'd asked for those emails, but ended the conversation with the words that I recall that she supported me going. So again, I don't understand why this item has now arrived today with no forewarning to me that this was going to be an issue. So it is really petty politics, and it is one of the worst features of this council that we do this to ourselves and self-flagellate in front of the community. So look, it's up to you whether I go or not. There's budget there for me to go. I said, I didn't have the chance to say, but in answer to your question, Councillor Noonan, absolutely I'll be prepared to pay for the airfares. I might even ask Matt Laurie's mum if I could stay in a spare room as well, or I'll stay with my own family. The point is there's budget there. I'd like to go to this. It's up to you whether I go or not. If you want to stand on a slightly unusual and inconsistent point in the policy, which wasn't applied last year when Councillor Dalberg and Councillor Fulton went to the second consecutive meeting, or indeed, as Councillor Laurie's pointed out, Councillor Walker's gone to several non-educational conferences. So over to you. That's fine.
Now, do I have anyone else speaking against the amendment?
Point of order, Madam Mayor. That last statement was misleading to say that the conferences that Councillor Walker attended were not for educational purposes. They were absolutely in line with his duty as a chair, and I think that statement needs to be withdrawn.
I wouldn't, I'm just going to uphold it and say, yes, it is. I uphold your point of order, and it was a misleading statement. It was a misleading statement. Councillor Ackland, I've upheld the point of order against you.
I have a point of order as well. If we're going to stop the debate, Councillor Barker, I think quite unusually, brought up expenditure from the last term of council, and had it established that I spent more than my allocation. I think it is unfair if I'm not given an opportunity to respond to that.
I'm sorry, there's no point of order. That is not a point of order, and I'm not upholding it. We're now in the debate, and does anyone else wish to speak against the amendment? Deputy Mayor, followed by Councillor Dalberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I undertook this exercise, I tried to tidy up a rather messy situation that seems to arise now and then, and go back to what this council agreed to at the start of the term. It wasn't complicated. One, it shows 3 councillors had sufficient funds in their conference budget to attend, and one of them is going at this point. Secondly, I gave an opportunity for those who seriously wanted to go to make a contact with me and tell me why, and we would discuss the issue, and it'll be discussed by the Chief Executive, the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. It wasn't complicated, the opportunity was there. Councillor Laurie did that. He came to me and he discussed the reasons why he wanted to go. I was conscious of the discussion that we had prior to this and his advocacy for that, and I recommended that that would give him a good platform because it had a wider benefit than just this council.
I won't have calling across the room, Councillor Ackland. Can you please control your conduct?
I don't want him interrupting, it's rude. And so I considered the conversation that Matt had with me and what was coming up and thought, great, he should be able to go because he is advocating for other councillors as well as ours.
So I have to point of order. I did not call, misleading. I did not call Councillor Matheson, the Deputy Mayor, to ask his permission. I called him to ask him what his problem was. There's a big difference between the two.
Well, I'm disappointed.
Look, I'm sorry, I'm not going to uphold the order because that's getting down to a micro level that is just not worthy.
I find that sort of conversation pretty difficult since I'm here supporting the man. But anyway, that's his call. So that's what I tried to do, was bring it back to the policy that you agreed to at the start of this term, so there was no misunderstanding.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Dalberg.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to say well done for this piece of information in your document. It's probably the first time I've actually seen something that is straight out of what we're trying to do as the council and what we do in the conferences. Because the first one I attended, because again, new to this, was really to find out what the CEOs looked like. And, you know, we were hitting on what chairs and mayors looked like, because I hadn't actually met a lot of them. So that was very useful, the first meeting, And all I remember there was a lot of dysfunction from our council when we turned up in Auckland. And a lot of it was to do, apparently we didn't have a policy. So the next year, it's down in Christchurch, and I attended, and that was interesting because seeing what the new government and what they were heading to for local government, which again was important to get their feel of where we're heading, and that's why I was attending that one. And again, we come back and we said, gee, there wasn't enough paperwork, we never got to talk about the policies, we didn't know what you're doing. And now you get an email that says, please respond if you want to go. Please respond later on what the policies are, what you want to vote for. We have one on remuneration. That's where we should have been 2 years ago. We're finally there and people are complaining that it's petty. I really don't get it. And that's about why I'm actually voting against those amendments, because I think you've actually got a structure. You said this is your policy. We've done it before with our own documents here about ourselves. We're terrible. Okay? That's your policy. You had it all. You all agreed. You're asked to email. If you didn't make it, bad luck. That's what happens in the real world out there when they talk to us. If they meet a point, if they meet don't meet the criteria, that's what happens.
As a point of order, Madam Mayor, is that it's misleading because I did ask. I emailed through the process that I was told to apply for. So if we could pause the meetings and Mrs. Birch can go and get all the correspondence I had with her.
No, I'm not going to be.
That will then allow, well, it's misleading because I did ask on the basis of the process that I was told.
I'm just going to clarify. Councillor Dalberg, were you referring to the email from the Deputy Mayor?
Exactly what I said was you're asked to reply
to the Deputy Mayor's email.
Deputy Mayor, and that was the process. And so someone goes and makes their own rules up.
Yeah.
And suddenly we've spent an hour.
No, it's ridiculous.
I can't believe an hour on that.
No. Right, thank you.
It's
I'm not
misleading,
going
Madam
to
Mayor. I'll make a
uphold
point of
the
order.
point of order, and I'm now
Thank you.
going
I'll make a new point of order.
I'm going to put the amendment.
I'll make a new point of order, Madam Mayor,
I'm not
which is it's
taking- no, I'm not-
misleading
sorry,
because I
I'm not-
followed the process I was told to follow by the Chief
So you're
Executive.
being repetitive, councillor. I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, which is including councillor Ackland, say aye. Aye. Those against, no. Call for a division.
Can I ask a question?
No, you cannot.
Councillor Ackland. Councillor Barker.
No.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Dalberg. Councillor Fulton. Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor Matheson.
No.
Councillor Noonan. No. Councillor Rutledge.
No.
Councillor Skinner.
Aye.
Councillor Walker.
No.
The Mayor.
No. The amendment is lost 7 votes to 6. Thank you. So we'll now go back to what is there in terms of the process. We've got noting Councillor Skinner and confirming Councillor Laurie. I don't think we need any further debate. I'm going to
Just
put
point of
the
order, Madam
motion-
Mayor. Just point of clarity. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I apply to go to the
Sorry,
conference.
we're not speaking across the room. I'm sorry, we're not doing that, councillor. I'm going to put the motion, and we're going to do this noting the two. I'm going to put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Right, it's carried. Thank you. Councillor Ackland, what I suggest that you do is that you follow the process, which is to make a request to the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and the Chief Executive, and hopefully we can get your attendance up for the next meeting.
Saying that's misleading. I've followed the process that was given to me by staff for the Chief Executive and I've made that application.
Well, I have some concern about the suggestion that staff are to blame. I think you had an email to follow and it would have been the best thing to do that. It would have been a more useful thing than searching people's emails. Right, let's get on with the rest of the meeting. So we've got a final item on the agenda. And that is, two. Council status report in public, and we're going to deal with these, and then we're going to have a quick cup of tea, and then we're going to get into public excluded. 138 through 139, status report. Any questions? It's coming to a meeting. I'll move, we put that. seconded by councillor Courtney, thank you. I'll put it, all those in favour? Aye, against, carried. Final item is just noting on page 140 to 141 that there is further information on pet crematorium, so it's going back to community services. Somebody care to move that? Councillor McGurk, seconded by councillor Courtney. I'll put that, all those in favour? Aye, against, carried. And what I'll do is do the moving us into public excluded now, and then we'll break for morning tea. Is that all right? EJ, do you think it's procedurally all right?
Totally up to you.
Totally up to me. All right, okay, that's good then. A few things. Very little is totally up to me. Did you know that? That's one of the things about being a mayor. Very little at all. I'm going to move us into public excluded business. And seconded, and then I will adjourn the meeting. Can we do that? You can. And then if Nico and Ruby want to stay for a cup of tea, they can. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. I'll put that, all those in favour? Aye, against, carried. I think that's a little bit on, but I think... shall move that they do so. To allow it, seconded by councillor Barker. Thank you very much. So Ms Thompson and Mr Mark will be with us in public excluded for the reasons set out in the agenda. It's been moved and seconded. I will put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. I'll now move us back into public excluded, seconded by councillor Barker. I will put that. All those in favour? Aye. Again? Carried. Welcome, Roger. We'll start. In that case, I'll close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Good opportunity for lifting council before.
Nice.